Hopes and dreams diminished into ashes by one spoken name. A Rowan in translation, demon of the eclipse. A name that breeds terror into the hearts of all Ziska people. A non-violent race of beings who have greeted their sorrows with bleeding knees, stripped of dignity, freedom, will, and life. There was a new order, a new era. 3/4 of the Zispa race had been restrained in death camps like cattle, and others put to death as their families watched. The cold-hearted act of execution. Miles away, it camped torpid, inanimate. The rancid smell thickened to a putrid stench that burned at the noses of new arrivals that were not tamed to foul scent. Some tried to hold their breath or cover their faces with clothing, and others vomited. Some cried, mostly confused children. Others, mothers and fathers, held each other tightly for fear of losing one another. The people that had no one to call their own prayed in mourning whispers, while some stood silent, filled with fright and confusion. Hundreds of Norafamara chaperoned the newcomers like watchdogs. The steel gates opened. The wind began to blow to a chill. As the new arrivals entered into torpid inanimate, the people noticed 5 black Norafamara, 2 to select for experimental torture, and the other for death. The 3 other Norafamara were part of the selection as well. 2 to hold the individual by the arms, while the other branded the man, woman, or child's forehead as a sign, the Demoniques symbol, and were put to use as slaves. The new arrivals were herded in, and the selection began. And let thy cry come unto thee. Some of the old arrivals stood and watched, while others looked in opposite direction. A family of 3, a father, mother, and a little girl entered. The father was taken to be branded. He was then pushed to the side. His wife cried for her husband. The little girl held her mother's hand tightly, with one hand, while the other hand, an old and tattered doll that her mother had given her years before. The child called for her father. Papa! Blinstuna! Papa! The mother was next, and was separated from her daughter. The little girl held to her mother's hand, but was then taken away. She struggled against the Norafamara, but she couldn't break free. Nali, ni, tatant! The mother shouted to her little girl in gloom as she was about to face execution. Mama! Tatant! Mama! Mama! The little girl dropped her doll as she was dragged to a room nearby for experimental torture. The little girl's father picked up the doll and held it in his arms as if he were giving his child her last hug, and fell to his knees and cried for his family. Nora Farmer cackled. From a short distance, there was an old rival named Tusu, who saw the grieving father and quickly walked towards him. He kneeled beside the father. Come with me, new arrival. Come. He helped the helpless man to his feet. They're gone, the father cried while leaning his head down to Tusu's shoulder. Gone. Tusu consoled the new arrival while they promptly walked away from the entrance and into the crowd. Their souls will not diminish in darkness. Remember that, Tusu said. But in some cases, faith is hard to come by in times like this. But here it's all you have. Tusu took the new arrival to an old, weathered-down shack which had no entrance door to it, and a medium-sized slit for a window that was across the way, away from the spotlight. The minutes seemed like days, as the selection was still in progress, yet the lines began to dwindle in mass. The new arrival sat in the dark, staring blank at the outline of his daughter's doll. The lids of his eyes reddened and puffed.